You're listening to The Grip, where we take hold of mindset and martial arts. Now, let's get started. Today's guest is someone who's found a unique way to give back to the martial arts community. Not just by training, but by helping gyms grow, athletes thrive, and local combat sports continue to expand. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt who's been training for the past 4 years. And like many of us, he first stepped onto the mats looking for fitness and self-defense. But what kept him coming back was something much deeper: the sense of community, purpose, and identity that martial arts creates. Outside of training, he is the founder of Manage Memberships, a gym management platform that helps MMA gyms, BJJ academies, and fitness facilities streamline their operations while growing stronger businesses. But what makes his approach unique is that he believes a gym should always be a community first and a business second, a philosophy that shapes not only the technology he builds, but the way he partners with gym owners every day. His passion for combat sports extends well beyond software. He sponsors multiple local fight events throughout the year and is currently helping launch a new promotion with Mayhem MMA after purchasing a boxing ring to help bring more opportunities to the local fight scene. His path hasn't been without adversity, though. After a bucket handle meniscus tear sidelined his training, he put in the work to recover and is now back on the mats 5 days a week, a testament to the resilience that martial arts demands and develops. But beyond the business and the training, he is first and foremost a dad, and he now has the pleasure of watching his son step onto the mats and develop his own love for martial arts himself. I'm excited to have him here, and we have so much to cover. So without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Jonathon Klem.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. And do you prefer to go by John or Jonathon?
I like John. It's fine. I feel like Jonathon can be a bit pretentious at times. So
Okay, John it is. Yeah. Okay, John. Well, before we get into the works of martial arts and your business, can you just share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, upbringing, what you were doing before you dove deep into the world of martial arts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I am from the Midwest, Southern Indiana, particularly. And, growing up, I was always, more on the nerdy side, obviously being kind of into software, and that eventually led into a career. But I was never really an athletic person. And as I was going through everything, really the motivation to sort of get into martial arts happened right around 2020 when my wife told me that she was pregnant and we were having a son. And I was reminded of the fact that my father had passed away at 49 from congestive heart failure. And when she told me this, I was weighing in around 275, and it was not a muscular 275. I was getting winded walking upstairs. I really loved to eat a lot of Zaxby's and all that. And I just knew that I could not do that to my son. And I had a focus and a purpose in boosting my longevity and getting into better shape. And I didn't immediately go to martial arts. Instead, I kind of went to the typical, hey, we're going to hit up the treadmill and get some weightlifting in. And I got myself down to a pretty reasonable weight. But of course, just almost like people joke about CrossFit or being a vegan, right? We met with a financial planner who just so happened to practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he started talking about it. And I was like, you know what? That sounds kind of interesting. And I was shocked because I guess it's more common now with some of the people like Mikey Musumeci and all that, where sort of the nerdier dude doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is kind of on par anymore. But I know from the outside looking in, it was like, I don't know if I'd be a good fit for that, right? And anyways, he kind of held my hand initially. And I remember too, it was kind of a slog at first. And there were some times where I really had to convince myself to go into class. Mostly because a lot of it, like at the gym that I train at their warm-ups, they'll do a lot of the movements like jacqueries and pendulums down the mat and some of these really unnatural movements that feel very awkward and kind of made me self-conscious. But, thankfully with his help, I just stuck it out. And eventually that's what kept me coming was the community. It's just that that, brotherhood of individuals. And there's also women as well that are in there, but that camaraderie that you get and that sort of shared experience is really something that, if I'm tired or not, or I'm busy, I still want to sneak that in just as sort of, my mental medicine, right, to get me through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so do you feel like the camaraderie was the biggest thing about that environment that, made you realize that this was something much bigger than just a workout? Or was there something else that really kept pulling you back?
Absolutely, it was the camaraderie, and I remember I was the pet white belt of a blue belt. He ended up moving a couple cities away. His name was Mark, and he was showing up to all the classes I was at, and we'd get it partnered up, and that was a huge help as well because, there's always that awkwardness. You're coming into a straight gym, whether or not my buddy that was there or not. They kind of introduced me and that kind of stuff, and it's an interesting experience when you have another man that's sitting there, hey, yeah, just grab my lapel like this and squeeze like that. And here, yep, there you go. You're choking me out. Or especially the things like knee on belly, right? Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
move your knee like this. And then you can hear them change their breath. It's like, oh, yeah, you're doing a good job. Yeah. And it was hilarious. Just the way that worked out.
Yes. It makes such a difference having a mentor or, reliable training partner, knowing that like that's not a constant battle every day going in and being like, oh gosh, who am I going to train with? That like once you meet even just that one person, it can make a huge difference for some of those newcomers. So that's
Absolutely.
great that you had that. How big were some of the classes that you started off in? Was it a pretty large gym already?
Yeah, oddly enough, especially when I started, I guess there was a program, I guess it's still in existence, but for police officers, there's something where you don't have to pay for your training or it's subsidized or something up until you get a blue belt. And oddly enough, when I first signed up, there were maybe about a dozen to maybe even 20 law enforcement officers that were showing up every day to this noon class because I really like going to the noon classes or the day classes or morning just because with the family and stuff, it feels less like I'm abandoning them and more
Mm-hmm.
like I'm just taking a longer lunch break, right? So but yeah, it was very interesting. And I mean, since then, for whatever reason, that's died down. And I think it's maybe because a lot of them got to the point where they were going to get their blue belt and they didn't want to pay, or I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure what that is. But yeah, they were pretty big classes. Here lately, though, it's kind of died down a little bit, maybe like a
Mm-hmm.
dozen during the day. But
Okay.
the gyms I train at, I mean, their evening classes is pretty healthy size.
Yeah.
It's been around
Yeah.
for a while.
That's a cool like initiative or idea for a gym to do anyways. I've never heard of that. Just having free for law enforcement up until a certain belt. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So, 4 years into jiu-jitsu so far, how has training changed who you are off the mats now? Clearly, I mean, it's a good workout, and I'm sure you
Yeah.
saw just a massive shift physically going from, lifting treadmill work in the gym to also were you kind of supplementing and doing both still when you made that transition, or do you just dive all in?
Yeah, admittedly, I was probably foolish with it in that I was doing both. And then, two, I decided I got like a squat rack and stuff in my garage, and I started reading Starting Strength. And so I was chasing numbers on a barbell as well as doing this new sport. So I did get a lot of those sort of nagging injuries to begin with. I know a lot of like intercostal pain because now I'm doing these weird movements that involve pressure on my ribs, and I'm also trying to do heavy squats for the first time in my life and stuff like that. So I was kind of drinking from a fire hose. I was a bit of an idiot, right? Post surgery, though, I feel like I'm more mature with my process in that honestly, I still do the strength training, but a lot of it is in service to jujitsu. So
Mhm.
whereas a lot of people skip leg day, I do leg day 3 times a week, different kind of like Bulgarian split squats and all that, just to keep the knees healthy. I don't ignore the upper body, but it's definitely one of those where I'm more just trying to maintain upper body strength and I'm trying to push, leg strength and stuff like that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so I guess when you first started training, what were you doing for work at that time? Like, what was outside of the gym life like?
Yeah, I was doing a lot of contract work. I've been a self-employed web developer for the last 14 years or so. And so
Okay.
that's been the handy part in terms of it's easy for me to just I make my own schedule, so it's easy for me to just kind of pop out and do a noon class or do a 7 a.m. class or something like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just a lot of programming.
Yeah. Okay. And so then, building software for martial arts gyms isn't exactly a common career path. So, how did the idea of managed memberships even first come about to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So primarily, I was doing contract work for several different sort of verticals or spheres, and there is a lot of payment processing and that kind of stuff. So I kind of had all these elements in my bag of tools, and I had that bucket handle tear. And pre-surgery, I was probably training way more than I should be because there were several times where it was multiple times a day and all that. And I all of a sudden I had this surgery and it's like, wow, I've got so much more free time on my hand, and I am now trying to distract myself from this suck fest that is recovering, because I did the repair too. I didn't do the meniscectomy. I did the repair, which is a more difficult recovery process, but ideally I'm not going to need a knee replacement in my 50s or 60s because I kept a meniscus. But so anyways, I had all this free time, and I have a couple buddies who are in the space, not necessarily martial arts gyms, but I had two friends who owned 24-hour fitness facilities, and I had more free time on my hands. I sort of just volunteered to help them out. Wasn't really trying to charge them an hourly rate or anything, just helping a buddy out. And I remember I expressly went in there saying, I don't want to write custom software for you, okay? I just want to make what you have work. I think that's probably the best way to do it. I don't want to have to maintain anything and all that. And I was genuinely just trying to help streamline their operations. And then when you get in there and you see it, there's a lot of disconnected, piecemeal stuff that's not communicating. And even if you try to use like an API or something, so that these companies really silo their stuff so that they don't want you to communicate. And so it was
Okay,
very
whoa,
common.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
So,
So you got to break down some of the tech terms for me. And
sorry. Yeah.
yep.
Go ahead.
So you go in, and so first question for these friends that had these 24-hour fitness gyms, were these like privately owned, so like kind of their own little startup 24-hour fitness gym, or like as part of a Planet Fitness or something
They were
like
their
that?
own.
Okay.
They were their own.
And so then they had full freedom to kind of figure out what software to potentially use, which I'm sure is overwhelming in itself. And so then you're going in, you have an idea of how to get just kind of this broad system going to make their life a little bit easier. And then explain what an API system is.
Sorry, yes, it is an application programming interface. And so in a lot of projects that I've came on, I sort of view myself as a plumber, in that, someone has a system here and they want to have it communicate with this other system over here. And you'll see a lot of very common things such as QuickBooks and your accounting software somehow connects with your customer relationship manager, such as HubSpot or Salesforce, right? And a lot of those are like out of the box. You can configure that and do a couple clicks and get that. And then what I noticed in this gym space, very often you would have a door controller or an access control system, and that would be installed by some security vendor. And big names in the industry would be like Specco or Bizzo. I don't know why they choose those kind of names, but they do. And there's also a bunch of smaller sort of Amazon specials where it's just this little box that you can install, and they give you this very simple web interface that's not connected to the cloud, so you can't access it on the internet. You'd have to be physically on site to do stuff. And the big challenge was they would use various billing software. And so one of the gyms, they had actually gone through a couple different iterations, and they tried using Clover for the POS and Join It for their membership management. And then they discovered that it was a pain getting those two to communicate. And then two, if they even offered the ability to communicate, they would charge an arm and a leg to try to access this, right? And there were a lot of instances where things would just fall through the cracks. So like somebody's payment fails, and they know that, hey, maybe they don't get paid until Friday. So we're going to wait a week or 3 days, whatever their process is, to try to see if eventually the payment's going to succeed. And then if it doesn't succeed, we'll turn off their key fob. And of course, the key fob turning off process was arduous in that somebody would have to keep track of these were the failed payments. They would literally have to walk over to a separate computer, type in some information, deactivate that key fob. And then when and if they decided to pay again, they'd have to walk back over, activate that key fob. And it was a very laborious process. And I really tried a lot of different, tricks and things there to try to make it so that they would work. And I remember one of them they were using, I even made like some custom Chrome plugins to try to basically mimic somebody clicking on various things to try to speed it up. And you never get, where you actually need it to be when you're sort of just hacking that stuff into place, right? And it's not being supported by the company. And so after seeing that and seeing their pain, it was still, hey, I want to solve this problem. At that point, I started taking it personal, right? In that just my engineering brain sort of started cranking away at this and getting frustrated that these bigger names in the space were operating in such a manner. And, slowly but surely, I started cranking away at some code. And the biggest challenge was the 24-hour door system and getting that to work. And so I'm typically like a software engineer, not hardware. But, and through a lot of trial and error and digging through some code and hacking away, and much to my wife's chagrin, I installed a mag lock on our garage door. Like we have this breezeway and then a door that goes to our garage, not the actual big garage door. And so I installed this on our door here, and my several iterations of the first prototype hacking away at that until finally I had something that worked, and I showed it to my buddies and they kind of liked the idea and bought on, and they ended up becoming the first customers. And from there, it's just been an iterative process. And, what can we do to improve it? What can we do to make it easier for the customer? Where's some value add there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dang. That's wild. And you'd mentioned something about another friend who had a gun range and that was kind of struggling with some difficult software there. Can you explain that side of things?
Yeah, that was actually the same one. So I don't know how it's a growing concept. I don't know how ubiquitous it is though, but the idea of a country club, so it's like a country club for guns, and that they have a 24-hour fitness facility. Then they also have they call it a dojo, but it's, they have their mats and they'll do some training there in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And then they also have a gun range and then their pro shop with their POS. And oddly enough, they call it a founder's lounge. So if you have sort of the higher tier of membership, you get access, you can fob in. Well, you could fob in. Now they use, obviously, the phone app and stuff. But you could gain access to this private bar area that they call the Founders Lounge. And that's where they were struggling with everything, because they ended up having several different systems and they tried to piece together a bunch of different things, because their business model was fairly unique in that you would have the 24-hour component, but then also at their POS, it was set up that depending on your membership level, you may get different discounts on merchandise or whatever. And then also there was the standard, if you're a waiver-only member and you're not paying a monthly fee, anytime you shoot, it's going to be $25 to use the range. Whereas if you're a member, regardless of the level, if you're a member, you get that for free. But then there's some differing elements based off of how much a rental costs and all that. And it was very hard for their staff without the aid of this kind of communication to keep track of all that, because then it's like, okay, are you a member first and foremost? Are you in good standing? And then two, with a gun range, there's some interesting legislation or requirements there, in that, you can't sell ammo or handgun ammo to someone who I think it's under 21 or what, right? And so there's like all these little nuances involved in that they were really struggling with.
And so did that impact your approach to trying to figure out a system that could support them too?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it was, it's like trying to eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. And so it was interesting. Thankfully, again, I had all this free time on my hands. So I was like, okay, cool. Let's really try to work through this, because the one friend only has a powerlifting gym, which I say only, but it's a much simpler business model. Hey, do you want to get access to this door or not? And so perfecting the door entry and then the memberships, getting that working, and then throwing in the POS side as well. And so it was sort of a 2-step process in that, or 3-step, depending on how you want to look at it. But then, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that definitely did impact everything. And that was the goal. It was either, hey, we can get sort of these 3 main functions communicating and working together, or they're basically in the same spot that they were originally in.
And so, I mean, you kind of already explained a little bit of what the troubleshooting was like from, the 24-hour fitness gyms to the combined martial arts and gun range system that was going on. Is this like a constant troubleshooting process that you're having to do? Or, did you have this initial vision as you've gone and seen some of these places and it just kind of came to fruition after you were doing various coding? Or do you feel like it's still was a big learning curve and continues to be a learning curve each time you meet with a new gym?
Thankfully, it's gotten significantly easier in terms of, I would say that the biggest learning curve was the hardware component because that's probably one of my weakest sides as an engineer in general. But thankfully, that was also the simplest lift. And so, not to get too deep into the technical aspect, obviously, but a lot of door controllers are these mag locks. Because of fire regulation, they have to have what's called a request to exit or a push button. And so you'll see it a lot if you ever go to a gym and like you have to fob in, and then there's like a button that you can press and that
Mm.
deactivates the door, or depending on how it's set up, right? And so basically, managed memberships hardware sits on top of this power supply apparatus, and to make it super simple, it's all I'm having to do is remotely or programmatically short a lead, or I'm simulating the pressing of a button with my hardware. So that made it significantly easier in terms of I'm not trying to do a whole bunch of crazy stuff mechanically or with the physical circuits. And it made the software itself simpler on the hardware side. And basically, I'm communicating with the cloud, getting a response. Hey, does this person have access to this door at this time? Yes or no? And if I get a yes response, then basically the relay closes. You hear the ka-chunk, and you can now open the door. So, thankfully,
Mm.
that was the side I was the weakest on, but that was also the side that required the least amount of effort.
Sure. And so, when did you get to a point? I mean, it's nice when you're working with friends who you can collaborate with some buddies, they're patient with you, you're kind of filling your time as you're recovering from an injury. When did you get to a point of like, I could take this in a direction and really launch this into a business? And did you ever get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to start marketing myself and working with other companies outside of your kind of close inner circle?
Yeah, and so early on in the development, because this was a potential pain point that I was not aware of, and then all of a sudden I see this, and then me trying to fix it myself, because again, I didn't want to have to write any software, so I'm doing my research on my end, and you see all these like Reddit posts of people complaining and all this other stuff. And as soon as I saw that there was this market need, that's when it's like, okay, well, this is something I can monetize. And there was always something too with the goal of, I didn't necessarily just want to have the two buddies that I was maintaining this code for, because at that point it's not that economical. I mean, it depends on the needs and stuff that they want, right? So the idea was is to scale it to a point where, okay, cool, I'm just focusing on this and developing all these features and giving them this functionality that they enjoy, and they're not necessarily hiring me as a full-time developer. Instead, I'm just a software vendor that they're paying this monthly subscription to.
Okay. Cool. And so now you're working directly with gyms like, and I hope I'm pronouncing these right, Mayhem MMA, Gorilla MMA, and Satsuma Locus. Is that right?
Satsuma isn't, yep.
On both the tech and the marketing side. So can you explain a little bit on how you are supporting now some of these other gyms?
Yeah, absolutely. And so with Mayhem, they were my third customer, and they were the result of some cold email. And it was kind of interesting in that I really had to pester them. And I discovered now that I work with them, they're just not email people. And a lot of gym owners aren't email people, is the thing that I'm discovering. But anyways, after a lot of pestering, I got in with them and met with them and sold them on managed memberships. And so they were client number 3. And they were really the ones that sort of helped inform a lot of the marketing side of managed memberships. So managed memberships has a CRM component, and you can do email and text campaigns and push
CRM.
notification. Customer relationship management.
Okay.
And so, and working with them, because they were a new gym as well. It just so happened that I basically got to the point where I was ready for showtime, and then they opened up their gym in Henderson, Kentucky. And so Henderson, Kentucky is one city over, but you got to
Okay.
cross the river. And they were in a unique spot of being a new gym. At the time, they hadn't decided on any software. They were using QuickBooks invoices and a spreadsheet to manage people, and then they had the paper waivers, which unfortunately is a fairly common scenario. It seems like,
Mm-hmm.
especially with smaller rural gyms and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, working hand in hand with them has really helped inform some of the marketing stuff that is in managed memberships. And so I'm constantly working with them in terms of, hey, we're just bouncing ideas around, right? And it's like, hey, look at these promotions maybe that we can offer. And okay, does managed memberships support the ability to have sort of these discount programs or punch cards, or we're going to have these, maybe it's an event and it's a kids event, but if you have multiple kids, you get discounts on the second one, and some of these other, logical elements, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
playing around with that. In addition to the things like the check-in report, and we also have triggers now as well. Going back to the idea of a gym community, you can't fake that human element, but you can have the software help keep you on your toes in terms of, hey, there's this person who signed up and they've been a member, but all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they haven't checked in 2 weeks. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of helps inform the conversation. Hey, what, are you injured? Hey, we can pause your membership for you, or all this other sort of customer outreach that you can have, as well as automating the process of, hey, I noticed you're doing a lot of day passes. We also have these memberships if you're interested, and those kind of things. And so, yeah, just helping them, brainstorming or workshopping various ways to keep people in the door, or get people through the door and then keep them in there. I always joke, my son trains there now, and that's like the second gym I train at. And so I'm in there several times a week. I was in there just last night. They had a invitational, and so I was competing in their little invitational there. And then my son was there helping film it, and he got to get some grappling matches in with some of the kids that were there, even though it wasn't like an official. Anyways,
Sure.
point being, it's an existential crisis if they can't keep people flowing through the door. So I'm always happy to have them bounce ideas off of me and kind of workshop things.
Yeah, you have some additional motivation there.
Hmm.
That's great. And so, what I'm hearing, some of the things that you are supporting these gyms with, then we have customer outreach, pricing, and kind of the navigating the discounts, the original price, maybe like a check in system, and then access to some of these gyms too. I haven't been to many martial arts gyms, and I don't know if you've experienced differently. Have any of the ones that you've been into or seen have a fob system in place right now? That's mostly more of the well, I
That's
don't
more
know.
the,
What's your thoughts on that? Because I'm like,
yeah.
I think that's an interesting concept, but like maybe that's a new wave that would come about and kind of open up some opportunities for students. Yeah. So I'm curious, just to get your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not very common that I see people that have the fobs. It is very common. Well, it's hard to say. I see a lot of people just sort of recognizing faces and writing stuff down. In terms of having 24-hour access, it does seem to be that is something that's on the uptrend in terms of being offered. And like I know at Mayhem, they have, I wouldn't say it's a full-fledged workout facility, but they got things like a leg curl machine, squat rack, and that kind of stuff. And their big thing too is they're training their fighters and they're trying to get them prepped for, cage matches and that kind of stuff. And so they do offer 24-hour access, and if you go in there, you can grapple and do all the other stuff on the mats as well. And it also helps with things like their open mats, like
Hmm.
depending on if somebody's going to be late or somebody who traditionally would have to open the door with their keys, they can automate some of that door opening and those kind of things with the software. The big one though that we're trying to push is with managed memberships, you can get like a QR code that syncs to your Google Pay or Apple Wallet. And the idea is that like when you walk in, you can scan that with a QR code scanner that's at the front desk. And then the person at the front desk can see the results of that, and it'll say this member's checked in, their membership level or whatever. If it turns
Mm.
out that they're not in the system, it'll say, hey, this person doesn't exist, or hey, this person doesn't have a valid subscription because their payment failed, those kind of things. And traditionally, I've seen that either A, people are missing it and people are getting on the mats without a waiver, or
Mhm.
they haven't paid in 3 months, or B, you have to have a dedicated person that is looking at everybody and then recognizing their name or having that conversation, who are you, and then checking them in
Right.
through some various other app.
Very cool. And so, how much research did you do in like, okay, I'm ready to launch. I'm ready to start reaching out to some other gyms. Did it just so happen through research you're like, hey, I mean, this one's opening up. This is a great opportunity to kind of start pestering them and seeing if I can be of support to them. And then, how did you go from working with Mayhem to then being like, all right, now I'm going to just start reaching out to not just new gyms, but already established gyms? And how do you even market? Like, what do you bring to the forefront to even get their attention?
Yeah. Yeah. So Mayhem was an interesting one in that I have a Google alert that's set up. Anytime there's new gyms that open in the area, I'll get an email if there's any sort of marketing
Oh,
or
that's
like a
cool.
news article related to that, right? And then that's when I know, okay, cool, time to strike, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the other one is just general research. I do a lot of cold outreach. I sponsor fight events just to get the name out there, manage memberships and have my little logo on the apron and that kind of stuff. I try to stay pretty active with the community, even though, myself, I don't do any cage fighting. I have a huge amount of respect for the people who are
Mm-hmm.
doing that. A lot of cold outreach. Referrals have been a big one as well in terms of somebody just really likes the software. And it's a fairly small community. Even it was amazing. Nate Manis is the guy who owns Mayhem MMA, and he was a UFC fighter. He's retired now. And I was on a call with a potential prospect in Texas that is using push press. And that's a big part of the marketing as well, is that, I know people have pain points and like push press, people will complain and say, well, this is primarily a CrossFit first app, but I'm an MMA gym. So, we have these pain points. So anyways, I
Mm-hmm.
was having this call with this guy and he's like, yeah, I know Nate. I love that guy. It's probably been about 6 years since I spoke with him, but, and it's like everybody seems to know everybody and there's this like
Mm-hmm.
cross communication. So that's a big part of it too, is referrals. But then also I've been, from a business perspective, I've been hitting a lot of SEO and AI optimization as well. So I'm getting a decent amount of inbound from people who are saying, yeah, hey, ChatGPT mentioned you, I found you on Google, or those kind of things.
Nice. That's great. So now, looking back, because when did this whole process start? How many years ago?
So,
When did you get injured?
oh, man, so I got injured probably about 2 years ago, almost to the date, because it was during the summer 2 years ago that I had the injury. And I was recovering from that, yeah. So it's been about 2 years. We'll have a full 2 years of operations of like being in and installed probably around this fall.
Awesome.
So still kind of a fledgling business, but growing, fairly
Yeah.
rapidly. So
Yeah, that's great. Do you think you would have started and gotten to where you are today if it hadn't been for the injury? I mean, it sounds like you had hours upon hours
no, not at
of
all. Yeah. I
that's
would not have.
crazy.
I would not have. Yeah, because at the time I was very, and because I wasn't necessarily looking for work, that was always the thing. And said, Um, I really like that work-life training balance. I throw training as another specific leg of that. And I wasn't really trying to solicit any new work, obviously, and that's why I said, hey, I don't want to write new software for you guys. But after seeing the need and sort of seeing the pains and just taking that as a personal challenge, that's when it's like, okay, cool. Now we're in the thick of things and gonna
Yeah,
have to see this through.
that's great. And so are you at a point where you're still doing some contract stuff on the side as well as
A lot.
managing
Yeah, a
this?
lot of
Or
that's winding down,
okay.
admittedly. Yeah, a lot of that's winding down because some of them were like kind of longer term, that kind of stuff. But it's like managed memberships, thankfully, has gotten to the point now where taking on additional engineering staff, so interviewing people to,
Nice.
sort of help carry the flame. So,
Yeah, yeah. So what's that even like when you get to a point of like, okay, I need where I guess did you get to a point where you're like, I need support. I need help to manage all the chaos of this. And then, how do you even decide like how do you go about finding a team?
yeah, it's difficult. And because in the, 15 years I've been in the industry, I've avoided sort of building out an agency, right? Because I know that's a pretty common strategy. And I always kind of want to have avoided that because when you're working contract work, there's a lot of scope creep and that kind of stuff. And just having somebody that's,
What's
that you're
scope
hiring.
creep?
Sorry. People will say, hey, I want X. And then they'll see that you did X. And they're like, oh, that's great. Let's do Y and Z as well. And it's like, well, okay, I wish you would have said this to begin with. And then,
Sure.
which is always great, depending on how the contract's structured and all that.
Okay.
if it's actual hourly or, just based off deliverables, that kind of stuff. So I was just wanted to avoid all of that and also avoid having other people depend on me in terms of, now I've got to make sure that there's enough work in the pipeline to make sure these 2 employees are getting paid. But
Sure.
thankfully with managed memberships, the mission is more clear. And even though there are constantly new features getting added every week and improvements are being made to try to make things tighter and more intuitive, there's a lot of work there, but it's all basically headed in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really inspired me to want to make it so that, okay, cool, this is a resilient machine. And
Mm-hmm.
so far, I've made hires for sort of administrative and marketing as well. But the engineering has been one that I played a little bit closer to my chest because having a good product is important, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
early stages. And so you don't necessarily want to risk having somebody introduce lackluster code into things and all of a sudden you get a bunch of bugs and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been significantly more protective of that. I do have a backup engineer. He's been my mentor for several years now, early starting on in my career. And so I really trust him emphatically with, hey, he writes better code than I do probably. So he's always been like the backup helper, and he was also instrumental in the hardware aspect as well. Anytime I had any questions, I could bounce stuff off of him. But
Sure.
finally getting to the point now where it's like, okay, having a junior dev, mid-level dev, having, people that are helping keep the machine running in my absence, when and if I ever get to the point I want to take a vacation,
Yeah. Heaven forbid.
heaven forbid.
Have you ever within your contract works ever worked with like human factors or usability researchers to help with making systems more user friendly?
Not explicitly, no. A lot of that I find helps. I mean, just in the years that I've been working and hearing complaints or praises or various things like that, that's sort of where my usability information has come from. But no, I have not directly worked with any sort of, maybe focus groups or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah. Very cool. My husband is a UX researcher for the company.
Interesting.
And so I'm not on the tech world or even what goes in the inner workings of software and all that, but I get to take some of the nuggets from him just internally what goes on within some of these systems. And so it's fascinating. I mean, just there's a lot that goes on from all realms of the system and kind of as a team. And so I think it's super essential. So, I mean, I don't know even like the basics about coding. And so
it's fascinating. I don't know. I'm sure I'm sure your husband and I would have a very interesting conversation because from the stuff that we could probably share good war stories, let me put it that way. And it's amazing too. One of the jokes I say is managed memberships is CT easy to use, right? And I even got like the little shirts with the guy getting punched in the face. And I joke that the guys at Mayhem MMA love him to death, but they are not tech people at all.
Yeah.
And they are so appreciative of, okay, cool, this is great. We're going in, we're getting our stuff done. And they don't have to sit here and wait for a support ticket or even submit a support ticket. A lot of it is just like, okay, cool, this makes sense. You've streamlined it to the point where I can just get in and do my thing. Not a whole lot of bells and whistles. And that was the whole point of it all, right? Is that they're focusing on building their community and training their people.
Right. Right. And that was the next question I had is like, I know one of the main things that, I think really stands out about you is that you really acknowledge community first and business second. But I think it is a business. And so the fact that you have to make it to support these places, you do have to make it a smooth process, not just for these business owners that have all, I'm sure, well intentions and motivations when they start something like this. But the passion, I'm sure, for them is not, man, I can't wait to figure out what software system I mean, like that's probably so daunting and stressful and if not avoidant, I'm sure some of them are like, I'm just not going to deal with it right now because I don't even know where to start. And so they are doing the manual stuff, but then in turn that takes time and effort away from what they are passionate about, which is building this community and thinking about the classes and all the other fun logistics of owning a gym. So that's cool. And then you take the reverse and you think about the smoothness for the members too, because it sounds like what your system provides is not just to make life a little bit easier and more functional for these owners. But then also, as these members are coming in, it's not a monotonous process. Or, I think a lot of students probably fly under the radar, which in the end, if you go to a gym, especially a martial arts gym, I mean, martial arts, I feel like, fosters respect and support for one another. So as a member, especially in an environment like that, you don't really want to rip off people that are teaching you such valuable lessons,
Absolutely.
both internally and physically. And so you want to support the company and the business, because if they go out of business, you've just lost a huge part of your passion, and opportunities. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
very
Well,
cool.
and it's like, yeah, two prongs to that. It's like one of the things, so you can do inventory management and all that. And I know it's very common. People have, drinks and that kind of stuff in their gym. And so you see it more with the teenagers or the younger crowd. Inventory just walks off, right? And so it's like, that's always so tragic. It's like, okay, listen, if times are tough, go steal from Walmart, okay? Like, I'm not going to make a moral judgment here, okay? But like, you got these mom and pop operations, it's like these small gyms where people are just like trying to follow their dreams and help the community. Like, why are you trying to take money out of their pockets in those regards? But in the same token too, is one of the things I notice a lot of the gym owners struggle with is the sales and marketing. And I think that sales has become sort of a 4-letter word in a lot of their vernacular, is they don't want to come off as pushy or anything like that. And so again, managed memberships, you can do a lot of, text campaign, email campaign, and people are reluctant to bug their members or drop in people. And, there obviously is diminishing returns. But I always like to give the analogy of Penn from Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller, right? He's a known atheist. And someone had asked him about evangelicals or, people trying to spread the word of the gospel to him. And he mentioned it doesn't really bother him because his argument was, if you are convinced that because I'm an atheist, I'm going to go to hell for eternity, how much do you have to hate me to not try to convince me to follow Jesus, right? And so he thought it was like, that was their act of compassion. And I'm trying to convince these gym owners too. It's like, listen, you should get more comfortable with sales and marketing because you owe it, A, to your family. Hey, you're trying to follow your dream. You're trying to keep the lights on at your gym and at your house. And then B, you owe it to your existing members. They need to continue to have a place to go. And then there could be people like myself, for instance, who I feel like my life has been enriched immensely because of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the martial arts community. And if that didn't exist, I feel like my life would be less colorful and less enjoyable as a result of not having that. And so I really feel like a fire needs to be put under some of these gym owners that, hey, listen, it's not bad to try to promote your gym. This is what you need to do, and you're actually providing a service to your community.
Do you ever give various suggestions? Like, is that part of the troubleshooting process, is how they could approach sales in that manner where they're not feeling like they're being too pushy or getting out of their comfort zone? Or is it kind of like, here's what we have to offer, let's just try it for a bit and see what happens?
Yeah, a lot of the people that I onboard, a lot of the customers, it really depends. So I would say, obviously, with my first batch of customers, I've developed a very close relationship with them. And so it is more of like an open, hey, we're going to bounce some ideas off, or we're going to do this. And maybe we can leverage some existing functionality in managed memberships, or there have been conversations that have led to new features getting added as well. And so I would say typically managed memberships, like out of the box, there doesn't necessarily have to be that relationship unless you're wanting that. And obviously that doesn't really scale very well. Once we get to customer 1,000, not sure I'm going to have access like that. But in the same token, this close relationship with some of the early customers is really driving the product and making it better. And again, it's like, the money is nice, but I'm really trying to keep the doors open at some of these gyms and help them grow and get to where they need to go, because I am very passionate about the martial arts community and these small mom and pop. I think small business is, the backbone of America.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're seeing that get consolidated a lot.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm thinking, like, as a member, what are some of these like promotional things that I would get as a consistent member, but that I might get reminded of, or that would be important for me to see? Or let's say I come in for like a free trial or whatever it may be. So I know some gyms call you simply by, they just pick up the phone and call. Some of them will send, it seems like some sort of automated email system that kind of lets you know or asks you a question or wants you back in the door or tells you about like upcoming events. Or some do like push notifications so they have that, it's texting you. Is there anything else that I'm missing? Like, could your system help with that process?
Yeah, with all of it.
Okay.
In terms, yeah, the push notifications, text, email, a lot of that is already in there. The banner alerts. So, like for instance, we have one where during the summer they're offering a promotion. If you invite a friend, you and the friend will get a month free and that kind of stuff. And so, just keeping them aware of those kind of things. And
Sure.
additionally, like if there's any sort of like a special event that's coming on or seminar, or like at the country club, they'll do steak night every Wednesday, right? So they'll send out little text reminders and that kind of stuff. And, just keeping the community kind of abreast of all that. And there's also like a blog component. And so I know Mayhem MMA is big about, they'll have member only content and they'll have like a move of the week or something like that, just to keep people
Sure.
engaged. And it's always funny because like, they'll do a move of the week, and then the running joke is like you try to get that on everybody, right? When you show up at the open mats or at
Sure.
classes and you're rolling, right? You're trying to hit that on them.
Yeah. So now, I mean, you work with gym owners every day. What do you feel like separates the academies that people can't wait to come back to from the ones that maybe members are quietly disappearing? Or do you notice that just kind of ebbs and flows?
There's a degree of both. There is an ebb and flow. And what's interesting with managed memberships, I'm trying to get some data here and seeing what happens. But the summer slump seems to be real, at least for most of the verticals that I serve. Like a lot of people end up, they're going to the lake or they're doing this, that, or the other thing. And so maybe they're not showing up for classes. Maybe they're trying to pause their memberships. Maybe they're, going out of town. So that's always a real thing. And there is some seasonality to it. Obviously, a lot of weightlifting gyms or traditional gyms, well, even martial arts too, may have a lot of their New Year's resolution people come in, right? So January may be pretty busy. But I'd say, again, circling back to the community, having that accessibility, you also can't fake being a good gym. And so the idea is like, for lack of a better word, the McDojos and that kind of stuff, which thankfully you don't see a whole lot of that, at least in my area. But you always hear all the horror stories, and you get, some of the gyms that are saying, hey, don't cross-train anywhere. Those are some red flags and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, if you've got good curriculum, good technique, and you've got an inviting atmosphere that is safe, I would say safe as well. And so I'm not going to name names, but it's interesting. There are some MMA gyms in my area that they're geared towards, if you want to be a champion in the cage, that's where you're going to go. And so that's what they've specialized in. Me as a mid-30s white-collar dude who's just doing it to stay fit, I don't really fit in there. But hey, listen, they're making champions. So, you can't argue with the success that they've seen. So something that's kind of knowing your market. But I feel like the average gym is sort of, there for everybody and inclusive. You want to be a cage fighter, you want to just get some rolls in and be healthy.
Yeah.
You can do that as well.
Yeah. What do you feel like something students rarely see happening behind the scenes that gym owners are either constantly struggling with or just thinking about that maybe most students take for granted a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, keeping the doors open, honestly, that's, a pretty big one. And the amount of maybe anxiety that's involved in that and the stress. And so thankfully, some of these gyms where they've been around long enough and they've built up this apparatus and they've got some inertia to them. And so maybe they're less focused on that. And so maybe they've gotten to a point now where, they're just trying to foster a more inclusive environment in terms of once you reach a certain age. I feel like with the studio, it's like you can get a drift in who's there in terms of, you got your trial class guys and you got your seasoned black belts. And so making sure that the environment is such that those two groups and the people in between kind of feel still welcomed and challenged and that they're able to grow.
Yeah. You've worked with a lot of these, I guess, mom and pop places or these gym owners that, that's their bread and butter. Do you feel like you have an opinion on what point a gym should invest in management software instead of trying to do everything manually? I mean, is that from the get-go, they should already be looking for something like that? And is it feasible?
Yeah, I mean, well, especially like a lot of the software out there is more affordable than, some people would imagine. If you do the research, some of them are a little bit more insidious with how they do it. Is they'll dangle some limited functionality in front of you, and then once you're in and sort of invested in the ecosystem, then that's when they sort of double the prices and that kind of stuff. But I mean, I would argue, yeah, from the very beginning, like managed memberships has a pretty generous free version, as well as there's levels to what you can get access to as cheap as $29 a month. But I mean, you think about the cost of one missed waiver, right? Someone tears their meniscus and they don't have any paperwork there and they try to sue your gym. I can say from experience, those surgeries are very expensive. So not fun there. And then two, you think about what your average membership is. And so how many people are falling through the cracks, right? So just being able to make sure that everybody's paying in and of itself, you get, oftentimes you'll see whatever, that's going to be $130, or depending on the market or the area, you're looking at 100 plus per member for like the unlimited. And so just catching one failed payment in and of itself can pay for itself typically.
Yeah. And so I would imagine there are some, with any gym, there's going to be growing pains, or there's, things that they're learning along the way, or that they've decided through venturing to other gyms or getting ideas, or as their student load grows, ideally their system maybe needs to change, or their membership options, or whether they do packages, or all the things, punch cards, like you said. Let's say they're ready to make a change within the system that they're already working with you on. Do they just collaborate with you and like, hey, we have a change of plans. How can we make that work? And then you guys troubleshoot together, and then you change things within the back end? Is that how
so
it
are
works?
you saying if they're already a managed memberships customer, or they're moving from a different supplier or a different vendor, I should say?
Well, I guess let's say both. I was thinking if they're already kind of working with you, and maybe you guys start off with, here's our 3 packages that we offer, something super simple. This is what we're going to do. To now, hey, I want to start throwing out some just different options. I don't even know what those might be, but like the certain number of classes a month, or we're just going to do where, I don't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is because I think
absolutely.
different gyms handle the pricing and the contracts in general differently. And so as they change that as an owner, I'm assuming they just go right to you to switch that up and see what's feasible.
Yeah, I'm always happy to help. Thankfully, managed memberships is simple enough that, it's pretty self-service there. And
nice.
supports a pretty wide variety of, seemingly exotic payment structures. I guess just in the, just working with various gym owners and some of their requirements. So, punch cards can be a thing if you want to offer a package where you can show up for 20 classes or something like that. That exists. You can do where there is a closed end. So this is just a 90-day program, for instance. And so I'll see that more with training packages that are offered at weightlifting gyms. So maybe you're going to do some personal training. That's something that you can manage in managed memberships, tack that on to their existing subscription, and it'll bill them, once a month for up to 3 months, and they'll get X number of class credits. Obviously, the more easier and traditional ones is you have 3 levels or something like that dictate how many classes they can attend a week. That's, pretty much out of the box. That's an easy one. Very common scenario I'll see too is like if someone's opening up a gym, they'll offer like legacy pricing or like founder access or something like that, right? And they'll always have, there's always that bigger drive of, hey, we're going to lower our prices significantly while we're trying to get our initial customer base, and you guys are getting special treatment. And so the functionality exists off the shelf where you can do that sort of thing. And then whenever you decide, hey, this is no longer open to the public, it's no longer open to the public, but these people still have access. So yeah, it's pretty flexible in what you can choose there.
That's great.
If someone's switching from a existing vendor, thankfully that process has been nailed down pretty well. And that's one thing that we offer is free migration assistance. So if you're coming from MindBody or Push Press or some of these other competitors, it's a pretty simple process now. The biggest risk or that people are always concerned about is attrition and saving payment methods. And
what is that? You said attrition?
Yeah, attrition. So the idea is that, like, let's say that you belong to a gym and, you're on the fence about leaving, and all of a sudden they send you an email, hey, we're switching systems, click here to enter your new payment information. And if you don't enter that information in, that's attrition that they're concerned about, or people falling off. And so Yeah, thankfully, there's a process in place. Some vendors are easier to work with than others. Anything that's using Stripe as a backend is a pretty simple lift. So like push press, I believe MindBody is as well. There's Join It also is using. But anyways, anything the transferring tokens out of Stripe is pretty easy. We've also worked with a variety of other payment processors. There's typically like a nominal fee of like 25 cents a token, and a token is just a payment record. So
Mm-hmm.
they won't give you a list of credit cards because of compliance reasons. Instead, they do the transfer and they do all their magic in the back end, and then they give you a list of tokens that reference those cards. And so kind of we help facilitate that and do the transfer. And so when everything works smooth, which is a good 85 to 90% of the time, uh, an individual can get an email that says, hey, we're on this new system, click here to set your password, and that's it. And when you've already got their payment method, if they don't change their password, you're still collecting that payment
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of stuff. And even when it's not smooth, typically the customer information is already in there, but maybe because of something with the payment processor, or they're using, someone who doesn't do token transfer, that kind of stuff, there's still processes in place that can be used to make it so that at least they don't have to go in and retype all their information
Mm-hmm.
and do all that. It can be streamlined, and they'll get either a text or an email or something like that. I've seen it. We've set it up before where there's like QR code scanners in the gym, or QR
Mm-hmm.
codes in the gym. They can scan and set up their account that way, and it makes it pretty painless for them. They still have to, if you can't do a token transfer, they'll still have to enter their card info, but
Yeah.
again, makes it as easy as possible for them.
Very cool. Very cool. And so once they are established with you, a lot of that kind of editing as things change within a gym, if they potentially do, it's pretty user friendly that they can even make those adjustments before even having to troubleshoot with you if that's even needed.
Yep. And there's a lot
That's
of
great.
interactive demos and like searchable help and that kind of stuff. Again, try to make it as simple as possible, because I realize a decent chunk of my user base is getting punched in the face for fun. So, I try to make it as simple as possible.
Sure. Yeah, very good. So, if you were to give any academy owner a piece of advice to create just that stronger community, what would that be?
Well, unfortunately, it seems like software selection, I know I appear biased there. The thing is, a lot of these gym owners, they already are so passionate about their craft that I've worked with. I don't think they necessarily, at least the ones that are going to succeed, they don't necessarily need any tips or advice on how to build their community, because I feel like when you've got someone who's passionate about their craft and they know what they're doing, those kind of people are just inspirational to be around. And
Mm-hmm.
I was on a podcast, and I think the guy misspoke, but he made the unfortunate analogy of like, jocks or people not being that smart or whatever. And I know I joke about getting punched in the face, but it's like the idea is, where did you put your skill points? And when you see someone who has put their skill points in this one thing and they've invested their life into that and they've honed their craft, you want to be around those kind of
Mm-hmm.
people. And even if that particular martial art isn't for you, it's still one of those where they just naturally are these magnets, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing is getting that sales and marketing, not focusing on the software, sort of automating some processes. And I would say software helps that. And so the idea is that the good software, a good system gets out of the way so that these individuals who are masters at their craft can really shine
Yeah.
and build their communities.
Have more time, areas to focus on what they already are doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. So you cross-trained at several academies, it sounds like, and you've talked about just kind of that hesitation that everyone naturally feels walking into a new gym. Maybe not everyone, but probably everybody
Yeah.
has some sort of hesitation. And so why do you think that feeling is so universal?
I feel like a lot of it is the fear of rejection, or sort of the fear of looking like a fool. And you hear that a lot too in terms of just weightlifting gyms as well, right? People are
Sure.
and they think, oh, because I'm not super fit or anything like that. And I feel like anybody whose opinion matters is not judging you for showing up at a place that you're meant to get better, right? And that's like with my jujitsu experience. I probably still look a little stupid to this day, but I look so stupid trying to do a jacare down the thing. And so if someone listening doesn't know what a jacare is, right, it's like it's a crocodile walk. And so it's almost like how you see in the movies like Spider-Man kind of going up a wall, right?
Yeah.
Imagine doing that and you're trying to keep your hips as low to the ground. Not a natural movement at all. especially when you've been a computer programmer and you're in your mid 30s, right? And you're dozens of pounds overweight, if you're being generous. And
Mm-hmm.
so, anyways, but thankfully, I had a good support structure to get me through that. I had some friends in there. And so now on the other end of that, I see somebody else coming in. And if I see them struggling, it's not, oh, look at this idiot. It's,
Mm-hmm.
heck yeah, awesome. I hope
Mm-hmm.
they keep up. And then I try to be, hey, good job, or that was a good roll, or something like that, right? And it's like, try to be that positive voice in it, because you know that it's difficult. And I feel like anybody who matters, again, they're going to know. And so now it's gotten to the point, like if I'm traveling, I love to go to gyms that are wherever I may be, right? And just do some drop-ins and see what's happening. It's very interesting though, when you get that cross-training experience, because you see at a lot of gyms, they'll sort of have their curriculum and they'll have their process that works, and they maybe have their specialty or something like that. And so you're used to working against a lot of the same guys who know all the same stuff that you do. But then when you go to a completely new gym, it's such a fun experience, because those guys have, yeah, of course, everybody's going to know the basics of an arm bar and that kind of stuff, but there may be some little twists on things, or their
Mm-hmm.
general approach that's completely different from what you've seen. It's like, oh, this is interesting, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Just the flow styles too, and focus
Mhm.
points, I feel like.
Right.
So what advice would you give to someone who maybe is interested in martial arts, has been for years, but still hasn't walked through the door because they don't feel like they necessarily belong?
I say do it. Just you won't regret it. You definitely won't regret doing your first class. Granted, it may not be the thing for you, in which case I would recommend maybe shopping around, checking some other ones out. But I know there's absolutely no reason to be afraid that anybody's going to think that you're silly, or especially getting injured. I'm sure there are some bad apples out there, maybe, where people are training pretty recklessly, but for the most part, and again, having seen several gyms, if you go in there and say, hey, I'm a trial person or whatever, they know, and they're going to treat you correctly,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to get there and you're going to be able to see what's up. And if anything, I feel like the biggest one is, if you go in and you don't absolutely hate it, I would suggest just committing to,
Mm-hmm.
let me just try this for 2 months and see how I feel. Because there was that initial sort of, man, I just remember too. And like a silly person, I would drink pre-workout before going to it, thinking that that was somehow going to help me. And really, it just made me sweatier, and it messes with your cardio when you do pre-workout. And so it was just such a silly idea. So I wouldn't recommend that to the newcomer, but I would recommend, listen, just go in, set a date, two months or whatever, and just, whether you feel like it or not, just show up. And then after 2 months, quit if you hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do have kind of a personal question for you, because from somebody who sounds like you've been through a pretty significant health journey, just going from like 275 to where you are now and training as consistently as you are. I think one of the biggest I don't want to say trigger, but like almost where I want to be like, no, stop right there, is when you're talking about martial arts and somebody might say, oh, well, I'll go when I lose like 10 pounds, or I gotta actually get in shape before I go to the gym. And granted, I haven't been 275 pounds or 300 plus pounds or whatever, or at a point where I feel like I'm too heavy to do this task. So like, I do want to empathize with these individuals that maybe are going through, a phase in their life where they just aren't happy with themselves physically, or know that they have a journey to go on to feel better. And I know that that can be physically and emotionally taxing. But at the same time, it just kills me when there is that mindset, or almost like, I got to get to a point first before I can
Mhm.
go into a martial arts gym. So for you
Yeah.
personally, I know maybe it was unintentional, because it sounds like you went into a gym, started lifting, doing treadmill work, and then obviously got introduced to it through a financial advisor, and that's later on. Do you feel like your 275-pound self would have taken the leap at that
Possibly.
point?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because it wasn't intentional. I don't think anything ever entered my mind where I'm like, yeah, I really want to lose some weight, and then I'll start practicing
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu. I mean, and obviously too, empathetically, I get it. When you're heavier, there may be some joint concerns or some other things. And so obviously, my heart goes out to those individuals who have genuine physical limitations
Yeah.
that mean that they can't train. But, for the most part, if you're just heavy, I don't think that should be an excuse that holds you back. And one of those, like in training now, there are several people that are in and out of the various gyms that I train at that are large individuals, and they're making it work. And as a matter of fact, it's probably helping their weight loss journey, because that's the big thing for me too. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess a lot of people do like running, but it was never a passion of mine, right? I couldn't ever see myself being like, oh man, yeah, I just want to run 20 miles today. Let's go do that. Or I even struggle to do a 5K just because I get bored. It's not fun. I will do 5Ks and I do hit the treadmill up, but only so that my cardio on the mats is a little better, right? Or like if I'm trying to lose a little weight because whatever, I'm trying to work on something. Almost everything is in service to the mat time, including my diet or additional weight loss. And then that's just, I don't know, that's been my obsession and sort of my North Star in all of that. And I feel like that sort of helps. Whereas like before, it was very common to do the yo-yo pattern, right? And it's like, I'm 275. Well, I'm going to get down to 230. And then I'm just going to eat like a maniac and get back up maybe 280 this time and, go back down. I never quite, maintain anything. And now the whole time I've been training jiu-jitsu, I mean, thankfully, even when I had that knee surgery, that was a big concern of mine. But thankfully, I was in so much pain that I don't know, food wasn't that attractive and so, whatever. And there was always that like promise of, hey, I'm going to get back on the mat. So I don't want to necessarily get out of control here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when somebody is maybe starting their fitness journey or returning, I think some challenging parts of that can be one, like that self-initiation too, and that consistency and motivation, and then having to like guide yourself through various weightlifting routines or figuring out what cardio system that you're going to, begrudgingly do that day or whatever it may be, where I do feel like one of the better parts about a martial arts gym is one, it just naturally is a place that promotes consistency, right? So like the more that you come, the more that every single day you're going to see something where like, oh, you feel and know that you're learning something. So that's like mentally addicting. And then two, obviously, the more that you come, you get to see that physical progression through belts or just ease of rolls or, and then the community is, so then you have some people that are asking like, hey man, where you been? Or, that was a great first class, just that community that you build. And I think that's what it's all about. And so I think that makes that process a little bit easier. As intimidating as it can be to walk into some of those places, it ends up being much easier in the long run. So
absolutely. Yeah. Because a lot of the people I meet that are in martial arts are very passionate about it. And so there is a bit of a culty vibe in that, if you come in as a stranger off the streets, it's like, oh, hey, what's up? Yeah, nice to meet you. I'm John. Hey,
welcome
awesome. This is your first time. Welcome. Where have you trained? Have you trained anywhere before? Oh, no. Okay, great. Right? And then two, I mean, I'm only blue belt. And so the idea is that, you shouldn't be instructing anybody at blue belt. But, hey, listen, if I see somebody struggling, hey, why don't you try doing it this way? Or like, oh, if you move your hips here, or like a big one is like the 6-position drill. I know like my home gym, they were always on and on about that. And I highly recommend that to a lot of people that are beginning. And sort of, it's just kind of the progression from, mount to getting into somebody's guard, breaking the guard. And it's just this like flow. It's like a flow roll that's very specific. And that was instrumental too in my early journeys, because like, depending on how you start, it's like, okay, what do I do now? You know, or you find yourself in these weird spots and it's like, if you don't know what side control is, well, what am I supposed to do when I find myself in side control?
Is this a good position? Is this a bad position? Do I stay here? Do I move? Yeah.
Yeah. And the funny part is, it's like, under side control is typically a bad position. I know several black belts who will absolutely choke me out if I'm on top in side control, if I'm not careful. So, there's always that little fun part to it too.
Yeah. Always keeping you on your toes. Very good. So you obviously fought through an injury and came back to training, and that can be just as mental as it can be physical. So how did your relationship with jiu-jitsu change during that recovery process and now that you're back?
I feel like, it kind of did solidify my resolve. I don't think quitting ever was on my agenda during that time. I think some of it too, it was informed by the nature of the injury. Like my knee was always a little clicky. Way before doing jiu-jitsu, for whatever reason, like I'd get out of the car wrong and it's like click, click. And it's like, wow, that's kind of weird. And then obviously jiu-jitsu didn't help me out at all in that regards. And eventually it got to the point where it clicked and I couldn't I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand on it, right? And so, I had to do the surgery. But the whole time it was like, hey, I'm going to get back on the mats. This is going to be something I'm going to do. I don't want to quit now, especially having done the surgery and now my knees healthier, I guess, now that I did the repair. We'll see. I mean, knock on wood, it seemed to be, it's a little tight sometimes, but for the most part, it feels pretty good. So
Yeah. Do you have to approach your training differently now than you did before?
a little bit in terms of just now that I'm more cognizant of the potential downsides. And so I will say, like, the first 2 years of my training, it was really 100% gi. And so here recently, though, I split between 2 different gyms, and one's really a no gi focus and the other one is still gi. And point being is that, like, leg locks, heel hooks, that kind of stuff, I was kind of not exposed to. And so now that I've been doing more no gi, I'm starting to see a lot of those a lot more. And I will say, if somebody grabs my foot and I feel like they have a competent energy about them, I'm quick to tap, only because I know, I don't want to risk it, guys,
A
or it'll
confident
be,
energy about them. I love it.
yeah.
I love that.
It's like, well, yeah. And it's like, because too, it's like if you, some of the escapes, if you don't know what you're doing, like if you do the gator roll or whatever to try to get out of it and you go the wrong way, you're actually yanking
Getting deeper
yourself
into
up.
it.
Yeah, getting deeper into it. And so depending on who I'm working with too, like there's several guys who they know that I've had surgery and that kind of stuff. And so they'll maybe get it on and then just chill. And then we'll be like, okay, cool. I'm just going to chill. Now, if I were to try to get out of this, and then we'll go real slow and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I don't got anything to prove to anybody, know. So I do, it has made me listen to my body more in terms of like the first, again, pre-surgery, I had all these like weird muscle pains that I probably was a bit of an idiot kind of working through. And I remember like, bending down to tie my shoes for whatever reason, just really hurt my ribs. And I would be like, and then tie my shoes but still hit up class and maybe take an ibuprofen before class. And so I definitely don't do any of that anymore. But, so yeah, it made me listen to my body more. I will say that's been a big change.
Very good. Okay, so now let's shift gears because you're now helping launch a promotion with Mayhem MMA. So I want you to kind of talk me through how that went from idea of this might be fun to, okay, well, now we've bought a boxing ring, and kind of where you're at today with that.
Yeah, admittedly, that has stalled out a whole lot. I think originally when we reached out, that we had a lot of momentum going. There is a surprising amount of paperwork and insurance requirements and that kind of stuff. So we are still in that phase. We still have a goal of the fall of this year, but it is a bit of a frustrating endeavor, when you talk about if there's going to be alcohol sales, how are you going to promote this, that kind of thing. The most of it is getting the commission involved, depending on, like, we were going to do kickboxing. And so depending on where you're at too, the requirements are a little bit different. So if you call something Muay Thai, there is less regulation apparently in that. But kickboxing affords you some other opportunities in terms of the officials and the professionals that you'll have there. So, unfortunately at this time, I don't have a whole lot to report on that because there's been a whole lot of front-loaded effort. And we do have the ring, and it is in use right now too at Mayhem. It's kind of funny. They have it inside. And so they'll have like their grappling area, and then they have this like giant ring that the ceiling is almost too short to be in there. Like I'm 6'2", and so if I stand up too tall, I'm almost hitting a light, right? But anyways, we do have the ring.
Gotta put it somewhere.
Gotta put it somewhere, right? You can't just have it outside. Hey, gotta get some use out of it too, right? Give some of those fighters, they'll do their fight sims in there, so they'll actually be able to, feel what it's like with the canvas, going to your corner and that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, that has been stalled at this point, and it's like it's a lot of
logistics.
Insurance and logistics.
That's what I'm curious about too. Is it doesn't sound like it's an unfortunate situation. You guys are still just kind of moving forward with it. Because as soon as I'd seen that you were in the works of that, I was like, I cannot even imagine where to start with that.
Yeah.
And so, one, how do you find a ring? I mean, I'm sure you don't just find those on eBay and are like, great, let's go with that one. Like, how did you guys get to a point of like keeping your eyes out and finding a ring that you were ready and gung-ho to purchase? And then is the next step, what commission do we want to go under? Is that kind of first step, second step sort of
Correct,
thing?
yeah. And a lot of it too is budget and risk appetite too. And so some of it is like, thankfully the community is, again, small in terms of, there's only a handful of people that are really known for matchmaking in the area. There's only a handful of actual, local promotions that are being ran.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this, the genesis of it, one of the very first promotions that I sponsored was Caged Combat Productions here in Evansville. And they ran their event and it was awesome. As part of the promotion, I got like these VIP front row tables and stuff. It was a great time. Apparently, though, I guess they weren't making enough money or something like that. They ended up discontinuing Caged Combat Productions. And so that sort of was the genesis. And we started talking like, hey, because I'm out here, paying money to these other fight promotions to have my logo on something. Why don't we just potentially run this and maybe we'll make some money, or even if I break even, it's cheaper than what I'm currently doing.
Yeah.
And so that really started the conversation. And then from there, it's more a bunch of crimes of opportunity in that, to your point, it's not like you can just go on Facebook Marketplace and search for, regulation ring or an MMA cage. And so some of that is, unfortunately, we were too slow to move. We couldn't get the MMA cage that Caged Combat Productions was using. But there was another promotion that, they decided they didn't want to do it anymore. And the ring became available. It was a kickboxing promotion.
Okay.
And the guys over at Mayhem knew him. And they started talking, and boom, they purchased the ring. And then from there, that's when the fun started. And it's like, okay, cool, we have a boxing ring now.
Yeah.
And so now what can we do? Because you can't do MMA in the ring because there's certain rules. And there's rules about the size as well, too. So I think you can potentially do MMA inside of a boxing ring, but it has to be of a certain diameter. It's been a while since we looked at this, but there's all these things and rules and requirements and all that. And so then we started doing our research and then landed on, and thankfully again too, it's a smaller community. So we were able to communicate with people who are doing it, and they gave us some rough ideas of how much it should cost and that kind of stuff. And then communicating with the commission. So then once we know, and it's the whole process has been sort of this idea of getting this nebulous idea of, hey, we kind of want to do a promotion, seeing what's in the realm of reality, and then focusing it as we go there. And so really the process was, now that we knew that we had a boxing ring, we're going to do something either, kickboxing, or we're going to do Muay Thai. We didn't want to do anything traditional boxing because I honestly think that is a bigger regulated thing for whatever reason.
Whole different ball game. Yeah.
Whole different ball game. Yeah. There's a lot of that's probably going to run up your price. Oddly enough, you would think boxing would be less risk than kicking people in the head, but who knows? I don't know why it is, but so yeah. And then from there, it's deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And so I know one of the avenues is, if you call it a Muay Thai fight, it's less regulated. But from an insurance and liability perspective, you're still going to need various officials, and you need a ringside physician. And then depending on the setup, if you're going to have pro fighters there or not, you may need 1 or 2 ambulances and that kind of stuff. And if you're going to serve alcohol, you have to have a certain security that's on site as well.
Okay.
And so basically the process for that was, I went through and directly reached out to, I don't know, a couple dozen different venues in the area, just getting pricing, feasibility, that kind of stuff. And again, it was one of those like, okay, we're going to narrow our field here into what we're looking at. And, we landed on tentatively, there's a couple that we're looking at, but it looks like there's a local armory, seems to be the sort of favorite in terms of that play. And then reaching out to, thankfully, the guy who does the gun range that I work with, he also has a security company, and he has some connections to a local hospital chain here and stuff like that. So he was able to help with the standby ALS as well as the private security and that kind of stuff. So it was all just kind of piecing it together.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, we're sort of just flying by the seat of our pants, right? And unfortunately, at a certain point, you do have to get the adults in the room, aka the attorneys, and sort of just look at everything and make sure that nothing you're doing is crazy there. But can't really discuss it on the podcast, but we have hit a bit of a hurdle in terms of some logistics that we're doing. But I am a very persistent individual. And then obviously, there's these two cage fighters that are, they're happy to get punched in the face. So collectively, we're happy to meet any sort of obstacle that comes our way and try to get this pushed out.
Yeah, that's great. So, and all of that I feel like was so informative as far as all the little logistics, because I feel like just like starting a gym too, I think somebody has an initial passion, like I'd love to start a gym. And then you look into one aspect of that, whether it's equipment, and then that leads you down 100 different trails. And then you go down another aspect of mats, and then liability, and then the financial side of things. And so then you're now just found this web of the learning process, right? And then you have to kind of pick and choose and prioritize what direction do we need to go in right now. But I do think you almost have to release the fire hydrant a little bit and just be like, okay, I don't know what I don't know right now, so let's just see. And so that's super interesting. And so when do you get to a point, because you're talking all the logistics, and then you're like, okay, maybe I feel like we're getting close to having our ducks in a row. What kind of attorney do you even reach out to say, okay, now can you double check so we're for sure not going to go through with this? We put in all the work, and then all of a sudden we actually messed up in a tiny little area, or, don't want to get sued or anything like that. So what kind of attorney do you even outsource to kind of work through that?
Well, that'd be interesting. I don't know that there are, I'm sure there are actually, now I'm thinking about it, attorneys that specialize in that realm. With my setup, it was just through business and sort of being in operation. There is there's a local law firm that I've been working with and sort of bouncing ideas around on them. It is interesting though, because, people aren't just starting fight promotions, right? And so even my attorney's like, well, we're not going to say that we're experts in this realm, but we'll do some research in this. And the unfortunate side of it is, in communicating with a lot of the people that do have promotions that they're running, I think a lot of them are just reading stuff and they don't have an attorney that's reviewing anything, and they're sort of they're flying by the seat of their pants too. And it's like, that's risky, because hopefully it never happens, but there is the risk of death. And when people die, that's a big deal, obviously, and it should be, but you end up, your liability can be almost unlimited in that situation, right? If things aren't structured in the correct manner. And that's too where like the commission and that kind of stuff helps, right? Because the argument is, if you try to do anything crazy and sort of underground, the idea is that you were negligent. But if there's a commission involved and we're using their standard contracts plus our contracts that we have on top, and we're documenting our meetings and minutes and saying, these are the things that we thought about and talked about, and, God forbid it ever gets to that situation, you have this documentation to say, hey, look, listen, we weren't negligent. At the very least, we weren't negligent. Maybe we missed a couple spots here, but hopefully that limited the liability there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so initially, when you were starting to sponsor some of these local fight events, did that initially come from like, I think this would be a great marketing avenue, and then that could eventually help grow your own business. And then it sounds like, hey, I'm sponsoring all of these. Now we maybe are opening up another pathway for me to venture down, as if you're not probably busy enough. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of it's just passion too, right? It's just these sort of passion projects. And admittedly, obviously it was one of those two, just from a general marketing perspective, what can I do to get my name out there? Where are the people that I need to hit up at? And the typical, like if you're just Googling, hey, marketing, how do I meet people? Those trade shows and that kind of stuff. But there's not really a whole lot of martial arts trade shows. I know there's a couple, but I think that my particular client probably isn't going to those. And so, hitting up these local fights was a logical conclusion. Additionally, Mayhem, their fighters are incredibly active. And so it's not uncommon that their fighters will be half the card at some of these local promotions. And so I was constantly hearing about, oh yeah, there's this fight that's happening a couple months from now. And then I'd reach out to that fight promoter and try to work out some kind of deal. But also too, there's a degree of monetizing my hobby and being able to write off some stuff. And so it's like, it's absolutely great. There's one, they do a great job. It's Oni Fights, and it's like Northern Indiana. There's this restaurant. It's kind of an interesting venue. There's this like big barn style thing, and they have a buffet right before the fights.
and they do some kickboxing, and it's great. It's like
Cool.
I would pay to go there anyways, right? And
Yeah.
now that I've done this little business venture here, okay, they'll put my logo on the apron, and I'll get 3 of my buddies that can come with me, and I get to write it off. And
Yeah.
so there's that degree to it.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Well, and speaking of passion, so now let's kind of talk about clearly one of the biggest passions that you have is your son. And so he's now, so you said he was born in 2020. So is he now 6?
He
Or
will be
5 or
6 in
6?
October.
Okay.
He's 5 now.
Awesome. So when did he venture into martial arts, and what has been your favorite moment of that so far?
Man, there's so many. The 3 years old, believe it or not, he got started. And at my home gym, they have a young kids class, and that was in the gi. And so he was training in the gi at 3 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Working on
So
Asotogari. Oh man, it's so great. Working on his Asotogari and that kind of stuff. And it was always one of those, like, the wife and I having conversations, obviously, about, the best way to raise a son. And I really love the discipline and sort of that mental grit that you get from martial arts. And I always joke too that maybe I didn't have the best childhood, right? And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to provide some of those rough edges to my son, but the training allows him to microdose trauma is what I joke about, right? And so, but in a good way, in a controlled way. And he gets to see, like, hey, should I tap to pressure? And that kind of, it's like you get that little panic moment, and then you work through it. And so anyways, yeah, he started when he was 3 in the gi. Love that gym. They're still my home gym. I think that he just wasn't as engaged, and so Mayhem allowed up to 5 years old at theirs. And so once he turned 5, he's been training there.
Nice.
And it's funny, as they joke, he's a little RNC merchant, and because he's constantly hunting for an RNC rear naked choke, right? And I don't know, it's funny watching him work. And just earlier this week, they were working on wrestling, and the coach is like, hey, okay, guys, we're just wrestling. All right, no chokes. And then all of a sudden, there's my son, and he's like, hey, I wasn't choking. I was just grabbing his neck, okay? So he's a funny guy, but it's awesome getting to see him work in there. And, like, he's got decent technique in that. He's found something that works for him. He loves to do, like, body locks and then, like, take him down, sort of like a lat drop or that kind of maneuver. He does not do any single legs or double legs, and he doesn't do any traditional judo stuff like a ouchi or a soto. We're trying to get him to broaden his horizons, which I get it. He's 5, and he loves his rear naked choke. And it's just, I don't know. So, like, it's funny. He'll mount kids, and then they'll do the traditional, hey, their arms are out, which is perfect arm bar or head and arm triangle territory.
He's
and
like,
I try
get
to tell
those
him,
out of my way so I can get to your back and choke you.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, and so it was just the other night too. It's like I saw him, 3 or 4 times. He's like, and he'll do this weird thing where he'll just pin their arms down. And it's like, okay, cool. If you snake your other arm in there, maybe you got an Americana, but maybe that's too complicated for you. So let's just focus on the head and arm triangles, because I know you love to squeeze necks. Let's do a head and arm triangle, buddy. And it's just great. I love being able to connect with my son at that level. And, I think my wife's a little jealous because just before this call, Alistair's like, hey, I want to play fight, Dad. And, like, we're working through some stuff. And then, so my wife's trying to come in there and, like, oh, yeah, look at neon belly, and she doesn't really know what she's talking about. But it's like, it's kind of cute, whatever. But
you got to get your wife in the gym.
Man, I have tried so many times, and it is one of those. I don't know. Maybe it's not for her. She doesn't like to sweat, and she, whatever. She's at these, like,
that's a tough place to be if you don't like to sweat, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas me, it's like I don't have a choice. I always joke if I read too hard, I break out into a sweat, right? And it's like it only gets worse, especially in the gi. And I know so many times too, I'll tell her these stories and she's just, like, revolted. But, I remember, like, neon belly is a good example. And they talk about, well, at my gym anyways, they mention, try to align your eyebrows, and that lets you know, like, you've got the proper spacing. And then meanwhile, I'm just dripping sweat, like, right onto their face the whole time. You see those videos. And so,
yeah,
good times. But, my wife obviously is like, oh, that's horrible. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Do you feel like your son has taught you anything unexpected throughout his own training?
Yes, he loves striking, and so that is one of those. I don't know, it's probably inappropriate on the card. He loves to punch me in sensitive areas, and so I will sort of do like a weird modified Philly shell when working with him.
Yeah,
but to patience and like, one of the things is there's an interesting analogy between watching him struggle with a technique and then recognizing, oh yeah, I used to struggle with that as well. But then also as a parent, it's difficult, maybe I'm unique in this, but sometimes it's difficult to just recognize, okay, he's 5 years old. And so there'll be times where it's like, hey, can you look for this thing or whatever? I'll use a weird word that maybe I take for granted that he knows. And then it's like, there's that frustration of like, he doesn't know, or I don't know. There's all these little weird things where, as a 30-something, you take for granted, like, what do you mean? But seeing him struggle through the same techniques that I struggled with just 4 years ago, for some reason, that connects more to me than like, hey, this guy literally has only been walking for 4 years now.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe, we need to slow her down here and get less frustrated. So,
and
that's been a big one.
How cool, too, just to be like, oh, wow. He gets to experience this and knowing he's going to overcome it. He's got it. Like, it's hard right now, but he's going to just come out the other side. And to think like, wow, he's getting to experience that at 5, where both you and I are like, well, shoot, I didn't even get to even think about this or get exposed to something so grand till your 20s, 30s, some people's 40s, 50s, And so it's just great to see kids immersed in it because, one, they're learning is just on steroids and they're just like little sponges. And so I feel like as an adult, let alone, a parent, I can't imagine how much emotion goes into that, just watching them go and have that shared experience, but also so different from their little perspectives too.
Yeah. It's amazing. We had one where he was working, he had the guy mounted, and he ended up like ground and pounding, right? And I was kind of walking him through that. It's like, listen, because this kid was punching, and it's like, okay, listen, just punch him in the face here. And my son did some body shots. I said, no, go ahead, punch him in the face, right? And then he did it. And it was just so funny because he's like, oh, that felt so good. He was so excited, right? And of course, him being my son, right? He punched him in the face. The guy turned around and he took his back and then did the rear naked choke, obviously, right? That was his go-to. But yeah, it's like, I was shaking after that. I don't know. It was just so exciting, this kind of shared experience, seeing him, because he was just so excited at what he did, and how he worked through that. And it's great.
Yeah. And you've talked about little nuggets of kind of resilience and grit that he can gain. Are there any other life lessons that you hope he gains throughout his training, regardless of whatever belt he eventually earns down the road?
Yeah, I feel like empathy, oddly enough, a lot of people don't realize that. I think they get the wrong idea of like martial arts, but the idea of, hey, I know exactly what it feels like to get choked out or have my arm cranked on. And obviously the idea of a seasoned professional and someone who knows what they're doing is the idea that they can take it right to that limit and still be safe. And so the idea that he's able to focus on his training, get control of his body, but then also know how to maneuver in a safe way and have empathy for this individual who is his training partner, is his teammate, is his buddy. You guys are practicing to kill each other, but you're not, right? You're stopping right at that point of breaking an arm or choking him out, right? If you're lucky. Anyways. So, I mean, obviously the empathy I feel like is a big one that often doesn't get credit in the martial arts community.
For sure. That's a really good point. Okay, well, you've experienced martial arts as a student, now as a business owner, kind of a niche side of the business of martial arts. You're a sponsor, obviously a parent now. What do you feel like, or which perspective has taught you the most?
That's hard to say. Probably a student, probably just going through it. That was probably the biggest mover of the needle. I would say obviously they all have their own sort of synergies, and being a parent and seeing my son go through it obviously sort of reinforces the lessons that I've learned. But there was no substitute for actually just kind of going through it and feeling that awkwardness initially and working through. And I mean, it's still kind of awkward at that invitational I went to. They had me paired against a purple belt, and I lost within about 50 seconds. He got me in this weird knee bar. I was hoping I could kind of get half guard, and then he moved just right. And it's like, oh, man, there's that frustration, right? But it's one of those of being a good sport about it. It's like, yeah, hey, you got me, buddy. And now I know that's something I'm going to be on the lookout for. I was a little sloppy with my half guard action. Maybe I shouldn't have had him let him take me down the way that he did. That kind of thing. There's all these lessons to learn. But I definitely think being the student has really taught me the humility and that empathy, just as I was talking about with my son.
Yeah. And I think that carries over obviously into all the other areas that you're involved in right now. So I just think I can't imagine how many uncomfortable and unknown situations you've been in as you've built this business, as you are continuing to explore this promotion, as your son delves into all the phases of his life and just maturity. There's newness to it all. And so having to handle that with grace, even though there's times where it's like, oof, feels like chaos. I think we learn within martial arts how to respect and know that there's a lot of good that comes from the chaos as long as you can kind of stay persistent with it.
Well, yeah, just being comfortable with the chaos, right? Living in it, focusing on your breath, right? I find myself doing that even in work scenarios. And it's like, you know, someone's trying to mother's milk you or some of these other silly submissions that are just pressure based, right? And there's always that brief period of, oh, this sucks, you know, but then you're okay, calm. This is actually not really a good position for this person. Let me work through. What do I got to do? What are the next steps? Let me get my frames. It's the exact same thing. You're dealing with a difficult client. You're dealing with your son who may be having a meltdown because he can't watch Bluey or whatever. It's, hey, all right, focus on my breath. What are the next steps here? What can I control? What do I have control over, and what moves the needle to get to where I want to be?
Yeah, exactly. So after cross-training across various gyms, is there a specific piece of gym gear, training equipment, supplement, or product that you absolutely swear by or would recommend? Obviously, your product.
Yeah. I will say, you know, I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but Origin gis,
Okay.
I really enjoy those because at the gym that I train at that has gis, maybe it was a skill issue on my part in terms of I probably was sticking them in the dryer when I should have just been hang drying them. But, you know, I don't have time to do all that hang drying nonsense. But I would notice that before then, a gi would probably last me maybe about a year and a half before you started getting holes in it. And then with those Origin gis, I've had the same pair for over 3 years now and not even a missed stitch or anything like that. They've been holding up. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Origin gi is probably the only, other than that, I'm a pretty simple man with my training. I don't really do a whole lot of supplements or any sort of training equipment like that.
Yeah. And then books that you recommend. I know you had said that something about strength, you starting strength was a book that you had read and clearly meant something to you because you brought it up. But is there any other books that you feel like have been monumental to you or that you would recommend?
In terms of martial, I wouldn't
Anything.
say no.
Doesn't have to be martial
in terms
arts related. It can be anything. Business related, just for pure enjoyment. I do kind of like a book club sort of thing. So I put some of these recommendations from guests, whether it's products or books, just that people feel like they've gained from or that they really liked.
I will say I've been trying to get out of my shell. Obviously, as a software engineer guy, I lean more heavily to being an introverted individual. And thankfully, martial arts has been, hey, cool, this is like my obsession. So, oh, it's your obsession. We have this like link. But I've been trying to get out of my shell and be more sociable. And so I have been reading some books like Never Eat Alone. I think that was a really good one. And then How to Work a Room was another. It was a little dated in terms of when it was written, email was a sort of a novelty, it seemed like, or not necessarily as fleshed out. And then maybe too, just me with my background, they did go into some of the technical communication side of things or the electronic communication side of things that was a little not as helpful. But in terms of like the in-person or how to work a room and approach spheres of people who may be having their own conversation, I thought that was immensely helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Very good. Well, I always finish every episode off with two main questions. So the first question I have is, what's something that you wish didn't have as much of a grip on you in your life?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would probably say, I don't know. I would say I'm a little obsessive in terms of competition and sort of where I am amongst my fellow man, right? And so I think that leads itself into, you know, martial arts as well as business. And so I do have to be cognizant of, like, I'll go out of my way and turn my phone off, for instance, if I'm going to hang out with my family. And I put some systems in place to force myself to sort of turn it off. But I think that is definitely something that does have a grip on me in terms of just the competition of everything, you know, business and martial arts as well, and sort of trying to become better in that regards.
Do you find yourself getting in the trap of like comparison?
Sometimes, yeah. It depends. Like martial arts has been significantly better in that I don't view it as a zero-sum game. And so, like I remember when I first started, there was a lot of people who it's like, wow, they started progressing way quicker than I did. But then you talk to them about it, and they were like athletes in high school and that kind of stuff, or college, D1 wrestlers. And so it's okay, that makes sense. And so instead of doing the comparison or thinking, this guy's a jerk because he's doing better than me, instead like having a conversation, being like, hey man, you're doing really good, man. Do you got any tips, or what's the secret sauce here, buddy? That kind of thing. But yeah, definitely in business too, because it's like it is one of those where it's very easy to be like, oh, and oftentimes people are very cloak and dagger, and it does sort of feel like a zero-sum game sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, and then to reverse the question, what's something you wish you had more of a grip on in your life?
Probably family time.
Yeah.
That's always, I think that's everybody's regret. And that's really, it's like when you're on your deathbed, are you going to regret not answering that one email, right? Or are you going to regret not spending more time with your son when he was 5 years old? And so that's definitely something. And it's, again, that's something I'm trying to actively work towards, again, trying to have sort of the shared hobbies with my son, as well as I'm sort of pushing him into trying to be a software engineer. That kind of, we get him the little toys, that are, circuit boards that they can put together and that kind of stuff. And so it'd be nice, right, if we could work together and train together when he's older. We'll see how that pans out.
Look at the priming already.
Yeah.
That's great. Very good. Well, for those listening or watching and want to stay connected with John, kind of see what he's doing and following along. Biggest thing, you can check out his website at managememberships.com. John, are you comfortable sharing? I have a couple Instagram stuff that, people could follow along. Do you want to shout that out to the world?
Yeah, I'm Jonathon M. Klem on Instagram, also LinkedIn, Jonathon Klem. YouTube, you can check out Managed Memberships. Again, our SEO and AI integration's pretty good, so you can just ask ChatGPT about Managed Memberships. I'm sure they'll fill you out. And also, too, happy to chat with any gym owners that may have any questions. I can be reached at john@managedmemberships.com there as well. Happy to chat with anybody.
Perfect. Thank you. As well as I know you've done a lot with Mayhem MMA. So on Instagram, they are at mayhem.mma270. And then have you guys even thought about Fight Promotion name yet? Or is that processing?
That's a big point of contention. I wouldn't say contention, but it's one of those, like, there's a lot of nuance to it too, because Mayhem and Nathan Manis, because of his UFC background, he would have a pretty big draw in terms of the crowd. But anytime you have a promotion that's too closely linked to the gym, and if their fighters start to win too much, even though the refs are impartial and all that, there's always that, it's sort of mired in controversy there. So
that's a good point.
We have not solidified a name yet.
Okay,
no.
Well, for everybody listening or watching, you just got to follow along in all the other platforms because it's coming. We're just working out some logistics. And so I'm super excited for you, John. And I feel like my brain's about to explode. I've just learned so much from you. And so I appreciate it. I know I'm not alone. And I cannot wait to launch this episode because your perspective on what you're doing for the martial arts community is so valuable. And I think, it's great to just hear from somebody like you too. I think you're very relatable. Your business mindset far surpasses mine, but clearly that's why you're in the field that you're in, is to be of support to these business owners and to continue to help grow the gyms that we love. And so just thanks for doing what you're doing. And thank you for giving me the time and space. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to The Grip. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow along on Instagram at TheGripPod to stay up to date on new episodes. That way you can send over a DM if you've got a question you'd like to hear answered on our roll call series. Now remember, stay sharp, be grounded, and never lose your grip. See you next time.